Hey, welcome back to Left of the Dial. This is my look at 100 different groups from the 80s that were left of the dial. Basically, these were bands that were big in the college music scene. In fact, they had their own charts at the time called college rock. And so they were more alternative. But the thing is, a lot of these bands, they're not similar in any way whatsoever. They just weren't mainstream. So this isn't really a ranking, but more showing you 100 different bands from the 80s that were doing something different. And some of them really became influential later on. It's been a lot of fun. And so tonight we're going to look at number 70 down to 61. I just want to show you some of my resources that I use to find some of these bands or to just read about them and learn more. These were two books, Trouser Press guides. Both of them dealt with the 80s. This was more toward the beginning of the 80s, Volume 3, and this is the revised Volume 4, and this came out in the early 90s. And both of these have been really good resources. I've just read through them quite a bit. And a favorite was here, Spin Alternative, a record guide. Just the alternative music. Now this goes into the 90s, but just a lot of great information about the bands and what they were doing. Real nice stuff. I really love those kind of books just to research and to kind of learn what's going on. But you want to hear some music. We want to talk about some. So let's begin, shall we? Number 70, the Springfields. This is a brand new group to me. Sam, the vinyl douche, showed this album and played a track. It was incredible. I went out and I bought it that day. Sam does that to me at times. These guys, they came out of Champaign, Illinois, back in the mid-'80s. It was Rick Menck and Paul Chastain, I believe, and they made just wonderful, shiny jangle pop of the 60s variety. I mean, it's incredible what they did. Even their name, the Springfields, that's taken from Dusty Springfield's first group, the Springfields. They were part of the power pop revivalists that was happening in the 80s, and a lot of great music was coming from this. Well, this one here, and this really, it looks at their singles from 86 to 91. And it begins with The Perfect Day that you can hear in the background. And that's like has this earworm opening riff with these jangly type guitars and this shuffling drum beat and just layered melodies. The song Reaching for the Stars. The intro shifts from kind of a power pop feel into a psychedelic sound. Each song on this album, it's filled with these wonderful harmonies, just absolutely incredible stuff. Sunflower, which I'm going to play you a little snippet of. It's a beautiful song. It really, to me, it captures the essence of summer with its gorgeous harmonies and lyrics. It goes, in the summer, the sun shines on me all day. Isn't that nice? I think that's nice. Wonderful album. This thing is really worth looking at. You can find it on Amazon. I'd like to find some of the original stuff, the Springfields. Take a listen to that. Number 69, the greatest name for any group ever, Belching Penguins. Isn't that awesome? Or BP. Name of this album is Draft Beer, Not Me. And this was released in 1986. The group was formed in 1985 out of Sarasota, Florida. This album, it is about energy, and we're talking lots of it. There's pounding guitars, throbbing bass, and adrenaline-fueled vocals that are actually discernible. You can hear what they're saying. The songs, it's not typical. I mean, they deal with war, sex, drinking, along with anything else that they might have on their mind. But there's some serious stuff here. And by the way, no ballads were allowed. The group lasted until '88. Didn't go around long, and this was the only album that they put out. It is hardcore punk. If you're fans of suicidal tendencies, then this would be an enjoyable listen to for you. I mean, it's a very, very aggressive album, and it was one that was really left to the dial. That's number 69, Belching Penguins. Number 68, if you're from Canada, you know this group, the Tragically Hip. They came out of Kingston, Ontario in '84 and went on till 2017. I believe their lead singer, Gordon Downey, died. In Canada, they're called The Hip, and they played alternative rock and folk rock. They did 13 studio albums and released over 50 singles, and they're Canada's 4th best-selling Canadian group. This is their first full-length album, and this came out in 1989. And it is, what was it? It's called it's called Up to Here. Okay, it's right there. They actually recorded this in Arden Studio in Memphis. The music, it was bigger and was harder than what was on their original EP. It has really the feel of Heartland rock with the powerful guitars. And Downey, I mean, he's a cross like between Michael Hutchinson and John Mellencamp when you listen to his vocals. Songs like New Orleans is Sinking, I mean, it's filled with rocking swagger and snarling guitars. Blow at High Do, it's a foot stomping, hand clapping rocker. You can't talk. Boots of Heart, it's an acoustic slide guitar rouser and just nails the emotions of a wounded lover. Wonderful debut album. They never made it big in the States. This album hit the college rock charts and probably a few of their others, but then they kind of faded away. But in Canada, The Hip is where it's at. Number 68, the Tragically Hip. Number 67, it's the Meat Puppets. These guys, they came out of Phoenix. In 1980, they formed, and they went to 1996 in their first rendition. They reformed later and, kept playing. They played alt rock, cowpunk, alt country, hardcore punk. I mean, they're kind of all over the place. It was like a marriage of Joe Strummer and Hank Williams, shall we say. They started as a punk band, and the punk band had Kurt and Chris Kirkwood along with Derek Bostrom. Then they got signed to SST, and they decided that they wanted to create their own sound, which is what they did. And they blended country and psychedelic rock. And then there's Chris's warbling vocals, and his vocals, I mean, they're not the easiest. Guy's nice little inner artwork. This album here is Meat Puppets 2, and this was released in 1984. The band was tired of doing the hardcore punk. And one thing they love to do is piss off the crowd. Hey, who doesn't, huh? And so they began experimenting with putting acid rock and country western sounds into their music. And they came up with this. And this turned them into one of the leading bands on the SST label. There's like songs like Magic Toy Missing and Climbing, Magic Toy Missing, Climbing, and Lost. And they're really like country rock songs. But then there are slower acoustic numbers, Plateau and Oh Me. Both slower but nice acoustic. But there's also, there's like Aurora Borealis that has these wonderful psychedelic guitar effects happening. And then there is it's filled with these stellar guitars, but yet spaced out vocals. Really, really different stuff. This is just, it's a fun album. Lake of Fire is another song. It's just a hard walls to the ball rocker. Kurt Cobain, when he did Unplugged, he named the Meat Puppets and played 3 of their songs. That actually finally got them attention. And people began to go out and buy their albums. I bought this thing back in the 80s, and just something, you know what? I kind of forgotten about it at the time. I go, so. I listen to it now and I go, man, that is really good stuff. Number 67, that's the Meat Puppets, and this is Meat Puppets 2. Number 66, Flesh for Lulu. This band was formed out of Brixton, London, and they came out of the Batcave scene. Now, this is the third band I've talked about that came from that Batcave scene. They formed in 82, and they last until 92, but they've reformed a couple times since. The group, really, it's a mixture of New York Dolls and the Rolling Stones with kind of a goth rock atmosphere, but also there's post-punk, there's rockabilly, and alt-rock. All that's involved. They actually took their name, Flesh for Lulu. That came from a cult film in the U.S. These guys, they had a goth rock look, but they really had a rocker heart, and it really is felt within their music. This one here, this is called Big Fun City. It was recorded in 85. Also included was their EP that they put out before this. This is a wonderful album. It's filled with these riffs and influences of the Stones, but also the Velvet Underground. You can hear that resonate throughout this album, along with country, western, and blues. And this is a goth band, mind you. I mean, the album leads off, you can hear in the background, with Baby Hurricane, which it's a perfect pop rocker. There's 7 Hail Marys and Vaguely Human, and those are filled with just slamming guitar riffs and just these choruses that make you want to sing along, but there's a punk frenzy going on underneath it. Death Shall Come is another one, and it's just this piece of experimental foreboding, and there's a slithering slide guitar against this booming beat that's happening with a surrealistic sound effects dropped in. It's quite the thing. And then from their previous EP, which is on here, they had Big Sister Swing. And it's just wonderful sounding stuff. I mean, this is a really, really solid album that a lot of people in the U.S. missed out on. Flesh for Lulu, number 66. Check them out. Number 65, The Jam. Now this group was formed in '72 by Paul Weller, and at the time he was going to school in Woking, Surrey. And The Jam, it really became a mod revival punk rock band. They started in '72 and they lasted until 1982. They did their share of, shall we say, having that angry young man outlook when they started. And they were just another kind of a fast tempo band, part of that punk movement. But like Elvis Costello, they like to dress up. And these guys, they wore tailor suits, and it included a lot of 60s rock and R&B influences in their music. Paul Weller, this guy, he was heavily influenced by the Who's My Generation, and he really became fascinated with the mod lifestyle, which shows within the music. And get this, in the UK, they had 40 singles. That's incredible. Well, this is their last album. Like I said, we're doing the 80s, right? These guys started in '72. This album, The Gift, it came out in 1982, and it peaked at number 1 in the UK and was on the charts for 16 weeks in the US. This album, really, it's filled with soul and funk and R&B stylized songs. Precious, the song Precious has this hard funk bass groove with wah-wah guitars. Just really gives it the 70s funk vibe. There's a song called Town Called Malice, and it boasts a Motown-style bass line, similar to the Supremes if you listen to You Can't Hurry Love. You can notice the similarities to it. Trans-Global Express, another song. I mean, it would sound great if it was played by Sly and the Family Stone, because there's just horns flying in and out, and the bass and hard driving drums, just they laid down this incredible beat. It is awesome. The band broke up shortly after releasing this album, but it was a gem of an album. If you go out big, and that's what The Jam did. Number 65, The Jam. Number 66, it's The Fall. So this is an English post-punk group. It was formed in '76 and finally broke up in 2018. It came out of Prestwich, I believe, Greater Manchester, if I remember right. The founder and vocalist was Mark Smith, and he really has been the only constant member within this group. The music they play is kind of a post-punk, alt-rock, noise rock. A lot of people, they regard their music as being kind of abrasive because there's like this repetitive guitar-driven sound that's going on and these really tense bass and caustic lyrics. It's something a little bit different. Now, they've released, get this, 32 albums. Releases that much from '76 to 2018. 32 albums. It's by far the most prolific post-punk band, ever. It's got to be. And their influences, which you can hear in their music, was Can, VU, Captain Beefheart, and the Stooges. That's one hell of a stew, isn't it? Their music would have like this Teutonic dance kind of trance dance going on, and then there's a rockabilly backbeat, and it's combined with kind of an art punk feel. Not everyone got this group, and I would have to say the U.S. really did not necessarily get the fall. So this album is called Nation Saving Grace, and it was released in '85, and it was their 8th album. And when you read about this, some will say this is their masterpiece. And I have some other fall albums I didn't pull out to show, but we're doing this one. There's a song Cruiser Creek on here, and it has this repetitive guitar line, and it's highlighted by this pounding tom-tom. It just gives this song just this fury. There's songs like Barney and What You Need, and Gut of Quantifiers, I believe. It's not. Oh well, yeah, gut of Quantifier. That was what those songs are like. They're stompers, and there's these twanging lead guitar hooks, and then it's just filled with distorted guitars and bludgeoning drums. I mean, they're intense, so good. There's a song called L.A., and it's kind of a synth-driven number. And it really paved the way for, shall we say, future exploration as they moved more into electronic music after this. They have one song called I Am Damo Suzuki, and it's a tribute to Can and to the singer of Can. And they actually use a variety of arrangements from Can. Interesting album, let's say that. It's not for the faint of heart, but these guys have a heck of a following, and they did do 32 albums. So, The Fall, number 66. Number 63, Echo and the Bunnymen. Band formed out of Liverpool from 78 to 93, and then they reformed again, I believe, in 96, and they're still playing. Post-punk new wave band. They had the hits, The Cutter, Killing Moon, and Lips Like Sugar. When you read about these guys, there's folks that say alt rock is divided in what's called pre-echo and post-echo. That's the influence that they had and how they began to change the music with their sound. Pre-echo, many of the British bands were having tremendous success in the U.S. But then in '83, all these British bands, they began to face this backlash, and kind of an anti-Anglo strain of thinking began going around. And what had happened is you had the rise of the U.S. groups like Big Black, Sonic Youth, Husker Du, Minutemen. They began to take over. So these guys became big, but not so much here. But in UK, huge. I talked about before, Ian McCulloch and Julian Cope. They had started a band called Crucial 3 in '77, and then became Shallow Madness, but Cope sacked McCulloch, and he went on, formed Echo and the Bunnymen. So they actually this was their first, they had this EP that came out. This is their self-titled EP that came out in 1982. And on this they had the hits Back of Love and The Cutter. Then this one came out. This is their fifth album. This came out in 1987. It's just their self-titled Echo and the Bunnymen. So Warner Brothers, what happened is Warner Brothers brought in the band, and they played them an album. They played them Peter Gabriel's So, and they said, this is what we want. We want you to do this. That's the sound we want to have. Well, they listened to it. Yeah. But what they did do is they did this, and it became their most successful album, and actually hit number 51 in the U.S. And It was their hookiest and most memorable. They dropped a lot of the strings and they focused more on the guitars, the keys, and the drums. You have, songs like Satellite and All in Your Mind, and they rock really hard. Then there's Bed Bugs and Ballyhoo that has this Doors sound for good reason. Peter Masnarek, God, I can never say that guy, Masarek, from the Doors, the organist. He played on it because Doors was an influence to this band. Of course, there's Lips Like Sugar. Just lips like sugar, sugar kisses. Beautiful. With this heavy reverb. I mean, just a heavy reverb delight. And it was all over college radio. Lost and Found. It has a backward guitar solo going on. They just took the guitars, put it backward. Perfect song for the dance floor. This thing, what a wonderful album. They began to get more commercial, I would have to say, after this, but really a fun group, and their first 5 albums are great. Number 63, Echo and the Bunnymen.
Like a swan, grace on the water, lips like sugar, lips like sugar. Just when you think you've caught her, she glides across the water. She calls for you tonight to share this moonlight. You flow down.
Number 62, 999. These guys formed in London in 1976, and they're still going. They were one of the many punk bands that were there when it all started. They've gone from 78 to 07, I believe. They've released 12 LPs. I know not as much as The Falls, 32. Actually, in 78, they had a hit single, and it came off this album. And the album is High Energy Plan and was Homicide. Homicide, Homicide. It is one of those punk rock classic songs, and it got them noticed. And one of my favorite songs. But so this again is one of the longest lasting groups of the punk era. It's still going on. And when they started, they put an ad out in Melody Maker. And so some people came. Here's some of the people they turned down to play in 999. Chrissy Hine, not good enough. John Moss from Culture Club, no way. Tony James from Generation X, out. So, kind of funny how some of them, they went to do better. So this album here, this came out in 1981. And at this time, they were moving away from that punk sound more into just kind of a straight-ahead rock sound. They were sounding kind of, I would say, more like the Inmates. They were even had some rock standards that they put on here. They did Fortune Teller and Little Red Riding Hood. They gave them a fastier, kind of a punkier sound. These guys, they really were obsessed with, shall we say, a frantic energy, and also with kind of the sounds of spaghetti western guitars. You hear that happening along with the licks, and it just puts it over the top. Silent Anger, there's another great one. It has just kind of a trembly guitar sound and just a solid propulsive backbeat. No ballads on this whatsoever. Just some nice mid-tempo rockers going on, and then some punk angst. sprinkled in with some other songs. And Cat wanted to make an appearance. It took him till number 62 to do it. Well, you know, just another album I want to show. I'm not going to talk about it because I only have an EP of them. But this is definitely one of those alt bands from the 70s and 80s, and it's the Residents. They always wore those eyes. Just a fun group. I have a few of their things in CD, and I've looked forever to find their stuff in vinyl, and I just can't. And I don't know what the hell you did there, Cat, but scared you. So really not going to talk about them. And my black dress pants are now full of hair. So that's number 62. 999. Damn you, Cat. Number 61, coming from Washington, D.C., the Bad Brains. Not the Bad Brains, just Bad Brains. This was a pioneering hardcore punk band. They were known to play reggae, heavy metal, funk, and hip-hop. But what's really cool is they were originally a jazz fusion band called Mind Power. So when you think of all these punk bands learning how to play their instruments, these guys came in and they were extremely proficient with their instruments. What they did is they developed a very fast and intense punk rock sound, and which became known as hardcore. I mean, these guys were the pioneers. They released 9 studio albums and they broke up in 95, but then they reformed in 98. And they were also a black group in a white genre, which was super cool. Rock for Light, this came out in 81, and it was produced by Rick Ocasek from the Cars. Dr. No, he's the guitarist, had these churning metal guitar whirls, and it's just driven faster and faster by Daryl Jennifer and Earl Hudson, who played the bass and the drum. I mean, and they just pounded and just pushed things forward. And then there was the other Hudson brother, HR, and just the way that he would sing, and he sang with this soul and this fire and rasping brimstone. Great stuff. Now these guys, they loved reggae, and there's like 4 reggae songs on here, and they play very good reggae. In fact, I'll play you a sample of Rally Around Ja Throne. Right Brigade, that's the song on here. It just has this heavy metal screaming guitars just tearing through the song. The lyrics scream about social injustice. I mean, these guys were a very political band. This album, really, it has just this unique blend of punk velocity, but also Rasta ideology. The reggae stuff is just this mellow reggae, and it really blends nicely with just the hardcore punk that just comes and beats you in the head with a bat. It gives you a really complete feel. What a great album, and an extremely important album. This is Back for the Light, Bad Brains, number 61.
When we ride try to do what the Father said.
Well, we did it. There we did. Another 10. I hope you enjoyed. As you can see, most of them, they have not a whole lot in common, except they weren't part of the mainstream music. And that's what made a lot of the 80s really interesting. I hope you found something you liked, something that got you interested. I know for me, it's still just a joy to revisit. Please come back next week. We'll do this again and hopefully enjoy. If you've missed the other segments, they're out there. Take a look at it and catch up on what we got going on. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Really appreciate you. See you Sunday morning. Bye.